Hey all, Joe here, and here we are for How to Chandelure Part 1. Now this is going to be a basic guide slash some first impressions, as well as a few tips and tricks, but of course, the future Part 2 and 3 will be a lot more in-depth, so get ready for those, and subscribe if you want to see those in the future. Also, I do want to know if you guys want to see any more ranked gameplays, or if you would rather prefer discussion slash tips, so tell me that in the comments below, I really want to know. Also, I'm going to be calling Chandelure a girl, because that's what I think of when I hear her voice, but it really doesn't matter that much. Maybe I just caught a different gender Chandelure than you that I use on my team, so you gotta keep that in mind. With all that said, let's get this going. So the first and main point that I want to talk about Chandelure is that Chandelure is a very defensive character that has many ways to counter the opponent from approaching, and it makes the enemy just have a hard time getting in. It's very hard to play versus a Chandelure, and often you can camp people out. It's a very hard character to play versus, and a very good character to play as. But let's get to a little bit more specific stuff, and the first thing to say is that you are amazing at range, like super amazing, maybe one of the best. You cover very big distances with all your projectiles, and you can send out a lot at once, which make you have very nice traps. You can cover the entire field with your crab, and just spam it all over, and there's really not much the enemy can do. Now, a problem about this is that you do have little to no chip damage, meaning that the enemy can just, for the most part, shield a lot of projectiles, and there's really not much that will happen for you or for them. And as well, they can counterattack cancel a lot of your moves, which does weaken you quite a bit, but it still say that you are very strong at range, and overall, you can just keep the enemy out, you can keep hitting them, and there's not much they can really do about it other than shield or try to counterattack cancel. Now, the thing after that, I want to say that in the duel phase, you have a lot of long, disjointed, weak, and strong attacks that are very hard to counter from the opponent's point of view. As well, they beat out a lot of the enemy's options straight out, and their hitboxes are just huge and very difficult to overcome, especially for when you're fighting somebody that's a close range fighter. They'll try to go in, you can just use one of these disjointed hitboxes, hit them away, there's really not much they can do about it, and then after you hit them away, you can go for some of your long range moves. Overall, this just combos really well with your long range attacks and makes you a very strong fighter. And a thing after that is I want to mention that you have a ton of moves that can be charged. And by a ton, I mean like half of your kit can be charged. It really doesn't make any sense. For most other characters, you can only charge maybe 1, 2, or 3 moves. But with Chandelure, you have like 7 or 8 moves that you can charge and you can go for. Now, this is really nice because, of course, they get powered up damage and powered up knockback, powered up movement, all that stuff. And as well, they let you charge it, which makes so that if the opponent goes for something like a counterattack, you can just charge past the counterattack and then attack after they're finished counterattacking. Essentially, it just lets you have a bit more mix-up potential on your side because they don't know if you're going to charge your move, they don't know if you're just going to immediately go for your move. So yeah, you have that when you're playing Chandelure. Next, you apply a ton of stinking debuffs. Now, Chandelure has probably some of the most debuff applying moves in the entire game. You have a lot of different things that apply debuffs, and overall, this is pretty broken for the main reason that when you use your move Hex, it does more damage for the more debuffs you do. And the thing is, of course, because your kit just applies so many debuffs, often you'll have at least 1 or 2 debuffs on the enemy. You'll be able to do this with your Hex move and just do a ton of the enemy's HP with your command grab. It's just really ridiculous and super strong. Other than that, another move in particular that's super good at Chandelure is, of course, Overheat. This move is just borderline broken. You can use this and there's almost nothing the opponent can do. They can either shield or they can get hit by it. That's about it. It's a really strong move. It does amazing in almost every single situation. Overheat and Hex probably some of my favorite moves of this character and makes Chandelure overall a lot better of a character, especially in the duel phase. Now, on a bit of a side note, Chandelure is also the easiest character in the game to beat the Farum League with, grind levels with, and get money with, and of course unlock all the items with because of your forward Y or your side Y, depending on what phase you're in. CPUs haven't a clue what to do versus your laser, and if you just keep on spamming it, they really don't know what to do. You just have to use it right as they get up, and you can almost get a perfect every single game in the Farum League. I hope that Nintendo will someday patch this, but as for now, definitely Chandelure is the best character to beat the Farum League with, so that's a nice bonus as well. And the final main thing I want to talk about her is that I really don't like her burst attack. It doesn't add way too much to the table, but I guess it does give you a little bit extra damage and also makes you a little bit more safe. It pretty much makes so your enemy has no options to come in because of course, your burst attack and your overheat, and those things together pretty much beat everything. This gives you some free time to camp, but in general, it's still not my favorite move in the game. But now let's go off to the basic playstyle of Chandelure. And as for the basic playstyle of Chandelure, I'm going to say that I found it to be a very defensive one with little to no going in at all. Your main objective is to try to keep the enemy afar, but luckily for Chandelure, that really isn't way too hard. You have a huge amount of long range attacks in both the duel and field phase, and it's very hard for the enemy to approach you overall. Most of your moves come out fast, cover a lot of land, and usually they just must be shielded, which is nice because you can just go for a Hex or a grab. Of course, you don't often do a lot of block damage, but you still have some nice pressure with all your range attacks. Most of your attacks just move fast, cover big areas, and in general, just very strong moves and some of the best in the business. As well with all this, you have beast things like Overheat and Hex, which let you do insane damage, and in the end, overall, I'd just say you're really defensive, but you do have a very high damage dealing playstyle while you're at that defense. Now, as for the field phase in particular, you can do quite a bit here. Your normal side Y is great as it almost always has to be shielded, and of course the laser does great against shields, so that's really nice. Also, you have a few moves that slowly approach the enemy, such as Will-O-Wisp, and finally you have some long range attacks such as your eruption type moves that send fire like a cannon, and this can be used really great as a wall next to your opponent and kind of force them to approach or walk into certain areas. Also, if you do hit this eruption type move, it does a lot of damage, but yeah, I'd say it's more for the traps. Overall, I'd just say that Chandelure is one of the masters of the field phase. You have so many options here, and your options most oftenly will just beat out a lot of enemies. Now, of course, there are also quite a bit of downsides to this mode, mainly that if an enemy gets in your face, you're going to have a really hard time getting past them and getting them off of you. You have one move that kind of does this other than your counter, and that is, of course, your charge side Y to get them off you, but that takes a little bit of time and is just not really great. In general, just don't let the enemy get close to you, and you'll do fine in this mode. Now, for the duel phase, I need to say that you're actually pretty good close-up here. Unlike the field phase, you can go mono-to-mono close-up, but you also have the bonus of having those projectiles that I mentioned in the field phase. Of course, you have Will-O-Wisp, the laser, and the smoke, which is really nice here, but she also has quite a bit more in this mode. Firstly, of course, she has the flamethrower hitboxes on quite a few of her moves. These things are almost impossible to beat out and give her a lot of free stinking spacing. As well, her limbs become huge here, and a lot of her moves just spurt fire out and give you a lot of free damage. She has some good combos here, and of course we can't forget that Hex and that Overheat. These are just some of the most broken moves I've ever seen. Hex does just an unfair amount of damage if you have debuffs on the enemy, and that isn't very hard as a lot of your moves cause debuffs, as I told you earlier. Next, of course, Overheat's just dumb. If the enemy attacks or tries to grab or tries to use anything, they're pretty much screwed. They have to shield, or else they're going to take damage and just die. This move goes through almost everything and does so much damage, some of the highest damage in the game for one move. Overall, just really, really good, and one of the best parts about the duel phase in my opinion. Again, for the bad, some people like Weavile can't hit past your long range hits with his claws for some reason, and this makes it kind of hard for you to stay away, and it just kind of lets the enemy run up to you and do big damage to you, so it can be problematic against certain matchups. As well, once you've used Overheat once, and if the opponent shields it, then you get the debuff where you can't really use it that well for a while. During this time, they can be a lot more aggressive, and once again, they can just kind of beat you up close if you don't have your Overheat up. Now, as for a few quick tips and tricks of Chandelure, I'd say first, try to choose Magneton and Quagsire. This support set is, in my opinion, the best one for Chandelure, at least for most matchups. The reason being that Magneton gives the enemy 2 debuffs, and when you use Hex while they have 2 debuffs, you do stupid stinking damage. As well, it's very easy to combo into Magneton as this character, and overall, be like Shia LaBeouf, and just do it. Another thing I'd say is maybe try the support focused Nia. Now this lets you have Magneton from the start every single time, and this can be a game changer. Now don't always do this, but if you are fighting someone who focuses mainly on aerial attacks, then this can be a great choice. Finally, you gotta learn when to go in. With Chandelure, you're almost always wanting to be staying away and trying to go for these long range hits, but there's a lot of times when you could simply walk up and grab the enemy while they expect a projectile and they try to shield it. Just keep this in mind and try to add this to your gameplay whenever you're playing. Finally, I assume the Chandelure will be quite strong at the start, as she is right now, and move down the tiers a little bit over time as people kind of figure out how to beat her. Right now, she's almost unstoppable with some of the highest ranking spots online right now, and wrecking house in some smaller tournaments. The fighter just seems so good of now, but of course you can counterattack, dash cancel a lot of her options, and just shield them, so maybe once people put that together a little bit more, she might be weakened a little bit. Still, she is a lot better than I expected from the beginning, and no matter what, I feel like she has a big shot for a future in the competitive community. And that's all I'm going to say about Chandelure. I hope you enjoyed the video. I feel like this character is pretty good, but I guess we're really going to have to see. If you like the video, make sure to like, comment down below anything you know about Chandelure, any tips you have or anything like that, maybe even any questions. Subscribe if you enjoy these videos and want to see more in the future, and of course, answer the question that I had at the beginning of the video. And you can go back to that if you really want to know the question. Thank you all for watching though, and I'll be seeing you all next time.